إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Verily all praises are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the heavens and the earth, Lord of all of the creation. And we seek His help and His forgiveness alone. We seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the evil within our own selves and from the evil of our own actions. Whomsoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides, there is no one that can misguide. And whomsoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leaves to be misguided, there is no one that can guide. I testify that none has the right to be worshipped, to be followed and to be obeyed except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I testify that the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the servant of Allah and His last and final prophet and messenger, who was sent for the whole of mankind. And whomsoever does not believe upon him, we testify this person is a disbeliever and he will be one of the losers on the Day of Judgment. And I testify that the only way of life, the only deen that is acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to God Almighty, is Islam, is total submission, total istislam, submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because indeed that is the whole reason for our existence, my dear Muslims, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and to worship Him with Tawheed, to have exclusive worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with ifrad, not to associate any partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And like Shaykh Ali al-Khudayri said, the greatest maslahah is to stay away from shirk and to maintain Tawheed. Amma ba'd. Today's topic is mistakes made during Ramadan. Obviously, my dear Muslims, the blessed month of Ramadan is just around the corner. Only another few days left. And obviously we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the lifespan, inshallah, to be present when this blessed month of Ramadan comes. Because even though it's only a few days, subhanallah, there are many people who will not live to see this Ramadan. Because indeed the life and death is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and no one can bring it even a single minute forward or even delay it a single minute. And the notes for this talk today was collected by one of the students of Shaykh Umar Bakr Muhammad. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free him. Obviously the Shaykh delivered this talk many years ago, and today, subhanallah, obviously I'm delivering the talk from those same notes. It is clear to understandable to see Muslims living in the West making many mistakes in relation to their ritual acts and even transactions, since they have grown up and studied and lived in a kufr environment. Most Muslims unfortunately no longer prioritize with seeking the pleasure of Allah. They're often too busy working, studying, and when we say study, I mean the dunya studies. Muslims busy just watching TV, sleeping, leaving no time to carry da'wah or even study the great divine and unique way of life of Islam. Therefore it's come to our attention to address certain misconceptions and errors and mistakes that have occurred amongst the Muslim community living in the UK. And obviously, my dear Muslims, subhanAllah, obviously this just doesn't just apply to the Muslims in the UK, but Muslims all around the world. Because for many decades, subhanAllah, Muslims have been living in the darkness with the absence of the Sharia being implemented, of the absence of the Khilafah being implemented. It's only recently, subhanAllah, the Khilafah was re-established. But for many years, Muslims were living in Darul Kufr, living by man-made laws. They were living with the absence of the laws of Allah to be implemented. Muslims growing up in society where, Islam, the Sharia was maybe never even implemented. Like, for example, here in the UK, places like in America, Australia, where it was never conquered. And inshallah, one day it will be conquered and the Sharia will be implemented. And that is the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But for many years, Muslims have not had that fully comprehensive Islamic education. If you are living in Darul Kufr, where the education system is based on the teachings of Islam, Sharia implemented, no doubt the Muslims there will be more clued on, about aspects of the deen, because the state would make sure that every person is given the Islamic education. Sadly, many Muslims, like here in the UK, they grew up, they spent maybe 9 hours or 8 hours in the kuffar schools, and then after the kuffar school, maybe an hour or two, subhanallah, having some kind of Islamic education. Go to the madrasa for a couple of hours, and even then in the madrasa they don't teach you Islam comprehensively. They teach you a bit about how to read Quran, how to pray, maybe some rules of fasting, and that's it. They don't really teach you, subhanallah, Islam as a comprehensive deen, covering all aspects, from not just the 5 pillars of Islam. They don't teach you in depth about Sharia. They don't teach you about, subhanallah, when we used to grow up, they never taught us about the obligation of establishing Khilafah, the obligation of ruling by the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For many people, for many decades, that wasn't even on their agenda. For many people, it was just like, just perfect your adab, have your good manners, perfect your tajweed, yes, and once we fix ourselves, fix our families, inshallah, Allah subhanahu will give us the victory, and Khilafah will be established. Some people, they had this on their mentality. They never, subhanAllah, they never strive for the sake of Allah to see the implementation of the Khilafah, of the Sharia, to establish Darul Islam. So why does it doesn't come as any surprise why now they don't support it? For some people, they were in a completely different world. And obviously we know that the Prophet Muhammad said that whoever dies without to have the bay'ah to an Imam, he dies the death of Jahiliyyah. And that's why many different groups over the decades, they rose, subhanallah, to re-establish the Khilafah. And so that's why you see, my dears, when Muslims have not lived in an Islamic society with proper Islamic education, they become ignorant of many aspects of Islam, sometimes even basic ABC Islam, basic simple matters of the deen. And as it mentions here in the notes, subhanallah, how many Muslims nowadays, you look around you, especially here in the UK, they hardly even maybe spend 1 hour a week studying deen. They can easily watch a 2-hour, or hour and a half football match. They can watch and maybe an hour of cricket match. They'll spend hours studying about psychology, studying about chemistry, studying about physics, studying about this, watching some documentary on nature. But how many people spend an hour to study the deen, study Islam, study some Sharia, study some fiqh? Subhanallah. And this is the knowledge that we are more in need of, about learning about Islam, learning about our deen. That's what's going to really help us, and not only in this life, obviously, not only in the akhirah, but in this life as well. It is not necessary for every single person on the earth to sight the moon in Ramadan. And neither is it allowed to follow the innovation, the bid'ah of the Saudi government, who claim that every single country should follow their own sighting of the moon. Now, according to the Sharia, the month of Ramadan enters when the moon has been sighted, and not according to what the majority of people or the Saudi government says. So subhanAllah, for many decades, my dear Muslims, we used to have this fitna, excuse me, we used to have this fitna in the ummah, where some people, they say, look, the moon has been sighted. Some other people say, no, it's not been sighted, or I'm going to sight it in my own country and I haven't seen it, so I'm not going to fast today. And you see, sometimes people may be like here in the UK, someone, he may have sighted the moon, so he's going to fast tomorrow. Someone's living in the UK and he said, in Pakistan they haven't seen the moon, so I'm not going to fast today, and in Pakistan when they see it tomorrow, I'm going to fast then. Very ajib. This is just subhanallah. So that's how it extends, how people are so nationalistic, you know, of obviously someone if they come from Pakistan. Now how it should be really, my dear Muslims, if we're living in Darul Islam, it should be the Amirul Mu'mineen. He's the one, you know, he announces, you know, that tomorrow is Ramadan, the moon has been sighted, and everyone must fast. You can't be like, no, well, I need to see it myself. Well, no, I disagree. Well, I made this calculation and I measured this and that, and I'm gonna fast tomorrow. No, you must fast with all the Muslims. So subhanAllah, see, that's why when you have an Imam for the whole Ummah, you have the unity. You have the unity. Today, you see, you look around the Muslim world, all these so-called Muslim countries, they've all got their own leaders, they all got their own laws, you know, and they have division and borders. This is not unity. This is not how it should be. These borders that you see, my dear Muslims, they never used to exist. They never used to exist. If you open up the map, go look at somewhere like Egypt. How did you end up with a straight L on the map? You know how you ended up with those straight lines? It's those kuffar who came into our lands and divided up the Muslims. That's why you're seeing straight line, separating a Muslim from his own brother, to create these seeds of nationalism, to create these seeds of disunity. Those kuffar, Sykes and Pico, they put those borders in the Muslim lands to make us all be happy with our own piece of land, and not to help our brother who just, sometimes in some of these places you go to, on the map it shows a border, a line, but when you go physically there's nothing there, subhanallah. And that's how it should be really. The Muslim land is one Muslim land with one Imam. That's how it used to be from the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, throughout all the Khulafa. This is how the Muslim used to be. It should be the case you can travel from one part of Darul Islam to all the way to the other end of Darul Islam without a single visa. You know, your visa, subhanAllah, is the fact that you testify to La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. That is your visa. But obviously today, subhanAllah, we have these tawagheet, you know, in our lands. Most of them, they're just puppets of the West, subhanAllah, and you see so much corruption on the earth. So we don't go by, subhanAllah, what the Taghut Saudi regime, it says. This is not how it should be. And also, obviously, we know from our basic studies, we know, you know, even if it is sufficient for one person who's trustworthy, etc., if he sights the moon, then that is sufficient. At the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was one man, he sighted the moon, and the Prophet ﷺ accepted just his testimony. So that is sufficient. And you know, just as a bit of a side point, you know, for the ending of Ramadan, for the next moon, we say that it should be two people, yeah, to sight the moon. And from the observation and the studying of the situations of Muslims living in Britain, the following mistakes and errors have been seen amongst the Imams of Salat and the Muslim community in general. And all these errors and mistakes must be resolved and corrected in order to fulfill our duties properly and to have complete obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And verily, in failing to make the utmost effort to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may lead to our deeds to be nullified or not to be accepted. So obviously, my dear Muslims, we need to, if you want to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to worship Him the way He told us to worship. And we need to make sure, obviously, all of our ritual acts is done according to Quran and Sunnah. Or we could end up, subhanAllah, praying and fasting, and it may even be invalid, or we're not doing it correctly the way the Prophet advised us, or getting the most reward from our prayers and our fasting, etc. That's why we must obviously worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with awareness. That's why we say the purpose of studying Usul al-Fiqh is to make sure everything is based on revelation, based on Quran and Sunnah, based on evidences, and to make sure that we worship Allah with awareness. I remember, subhanAllah, many years ago, even in my Jahiliyyah, some people, they used to have it there was a case I heard of, subhanAllah, a woman, a sister, subhanAllah, it was a case of in Ramadan, she was fasting, so she wasn't eating or drinking, but she was committing zina. And she had the understanding that her fasting is still valid. Subhanallah, this is the level of ignorance you see, subhanallah, amongst the Muslim community for so long, because the people did not have the proper Islamic teaching. People never had the proper Islamic education. And obviously the sexual relationship during the fasting daytime obviously is something that will break your fasting. The fasting is not just from the food and the drink. So imagine this person, someone, subhanallah, he may be even just generally with his own wife, etc., maybe have a relationship, and in the month of Ramadan, and he thinks fasting is he can't drink and he can't eat. But like I said, this is the level of ignorance, subhanallah, we are seeing. And obviously, if we grew up and living in Darul Islam with Islamic education, no one would have an excuse for not knowing that. So that's why, my dear Muslims, sometimes, on something that's even what we say known by necessity, sometimes that could even be given excuse, where someone, he may have lived far away from the Muslims, he never had access to Islamic knowledge. So the first point mentioned in the notes here, in regards to some of the mistakes that people make in Ramadan, the first one is mentioned here is defections in the Imams of the Salat. And the first one is the fast recitation of the Quran. I'm sure all of you are familiar with this mistake. First mistake, fast recitation of the Quran. And when I mean fast, I mean fast. Inshallah, I'm going to play you a video from YouTube of subhanallah, someone's titled Imam Ferrari. Yeah, Imam Ferrari, obviously after the fast supercar. Most Imams, they have a great misunderstanding regarding to the ahkam, the rules of Tarawih and the etiquettes of Ramadan. And one of the first defections of these Imams is that they recite the Quran at a very fast pace, to the level where the musalli, i.e. the one who's praying, will completely lose any opportunity to have khushu', have that ritual fear and focus and tranquility in the salat, and purely for the sake of finishing the salat quickly in order to allow the people to go home. And this totally destroys the concept of praying with concentration and tranquility and khushu'. Obviously khushu' is something that is obliged for us to try to attain in the prayers. So, which is what every Muslim should seek in their prayers. Moreover, it is completely against the teachings of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions. Yeah. So inshallah now, just to give you an idea of when I'm talking about fast Quran recitation, I'm going to play you this clip, my dear Muslim. Maybe some of the, because this Tarawih is not, usually a lot of sisters maybe not go to the Tarawih. But as a little clip, if you, in your own time, you can search it up. If you just type on YouTube, Imam Ferrari Sab, just have a listen to this, my dear Muslims. Okay, subhanallah. Obviously you obviously my dear Muslim, you subhanallah, you heard that. Obviously you can see why they called him Imam Ferrari. Is very, very fast. I'm sure some of you probably never heard Surah Al-Fatiha recited so fast. And this, obviously, as I mentioned, my dear son, this is not from the Sunnah to recite, the Quran this fast like this. Really, what the Sunnah to recite the Quran is to, obviously, to have that relaxation. You to give every letter and its right due with the tajweed, with the rules of tajweed apply with tartil, etc. And subhanallah, and the Prophet ﷺ used to recite verse by verse. You see, so you can clearly distinct one verse from another. And I used to hear people talk about there's these Imam Ferraris, they recite very fast, and I'm thinking, when I watched this video, I thought, subhanallah, that must be maybe in some remote part of the world somewhere, where people are just not very clued up about the deen, and you wouldn't believe what happens, subhanallah. I went to visit my sister one place in East London, and it's in Ramadan, and I went to their local masjid, and subhanallah, I didn't know this is fast recitation, so obviously made the takbir, and the Tarawih started, and then this Imam, it was just Imam he just put his foot down. And I was there in the salah thinking, on my days, like, what is this going on? It just immediately destroyed my khushu' in the salah. And to hear the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be recited at that speed, it almost felt like, subhanAllah, it was like an insult to the Quran. And this is, I'm sad to say, this was at a masjid really where the people from mainly Pakistani background, and that video you saw there, again, I believe it was some people from Bangladesh or from the Indian subcontinent somewhere. And I'll be very surprised if you hear someone reciting the Quran like that when in a masjid where you have majority maybe people of Arabic speaking. And this is common with people who maybe don't understand the Quran in itself because they don't understand Arabic. And maybe that's why the problem is they don't really help. It doesn't help them to appreciate what they're reciting. And how are you going to ponder, subhanAllah, and reflect over these verses? How are you going to, even if someone made a correction, subhanAllah, if you're in one of these masjids and someone reciting that fast, you'll be probably scared to, correct the Imam, because he's got, as the brother says, he's in a rush, you can't have any pit stops. So, subhanAllah, obviously this is not from the Sunnah to recite like this, man. And the reason why people do it is because, especially now with the short night, people want to, go home. They want to go home, maybe eat, or they want to go home and go to sleep. And so they just rush the Tarawih. And other people, they have this thing in their mentality, in their mind, I have to recite the whole Quran in Ramadan, in the Tarawih. We have to get through every part, or else we'll not be able to cover it. So they have to rush through like this. But my dear Muslim, this is not how the Quran should be recited, whether in Ramadan or outside of Ramadan. And subhanAllah, to the extent I've heard, people, certain masjids, even they will hire, or subhanAllah, they will, get a specific Imam because he's known for very fast recitation. You see, subhanAllah. So where you may have gone to Tarawih, and someone's reciting at a good pace, you could be in the Tarawih could be maybe an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours. But with Imam Ferrari, no problem, half an hour and you're done. You see, so some people, even to the extent they will deliberately go to a masjid where they know the Tarawih is very short, because Imam Ferrari has been hired, for 30 days. Subhanallah. Obviously, my dear Muslim, you cannot have khushu' with recitation like that, and it should not be done like that. Yeah, so this is obviously a mistake many people are doing. Yeah, and I personally, I wouldn't pray in a masjid with recitation like that. So that is one of the mistakes, the fast recitation of the Quran. Another defection in Ramadan is the transgression in the dua. Yeah, the exaggeration in the dua. And these first few points is mainly dealing with regards to imams and the prayer. So in the transgression in the dua, another defection of the imams is that they transgress and prolong the dua, the supplication, beyond what the Messenger Muhammad ﷺ and his companions used to do. And the Prophet ﷺ never used to prolong the dua or make du'a'ul qunut continuously. So you see some of these, subhanallah, you probably see it maybe in Mecca or maybe other parts of the world. The du'a qunut is very, very long, very, very long, subhanallah. It's excessively long, and this is not from the Sunnah to do like this. Even to the extent the Prophet ﷺ, even the Salatul Witr, there's evidence where sometimes he didn't even used to do the dua qunut. Yeah. So you don't even need to do that. So, but the general thing is obviously to not, because bear in mind that there is a long Tarawih, and the people in the Witr, they're making the dua, and you're just going on and on and on and on. Yeah, so obviously not to make it excessively long. I know there's many, you make dua against many things, maybe making dua against the British government and the Crusaders, making dua against the Rafida. You need to get in the dua against the Yahud in Israel. You need to get the dua against Erdogan. You need to make the dua against Obama. And maybe you want to name everyone, but in name, oh Allah, curse Obama, oh Allah, curse David Cameron, oh Allah, curse Sarkozy, oh Allah, curse Ban Ki-moon, and say, oh Allah, curse subhanallah, curse Netanyahu. Okay, you can go through every single Taghut, curse King Salman as well. We can't forget him. But obviously you can smile, you're going to be there for very long. Maybe Fajr by the time. So just alhamdulillah say, Allah destroy every Taghut. Yeah? That's one way you can shorten it, inshallah. So obviously bear that in mind, because you got to remember, subhanallah, the Imams, they need to be aware that look, there are people behind them who may not be as young as them. There may be old people behind them, there may be children behind them, may even be women, subhanallah. So you got to bear that in mind. Another mistake that the Imams, they make in Ramadan is that they have this thing where they feel they must complete the Quran. Yeah? And there is no evidence whatsoever relating to the sayings of many Imams who claim that the recitation of the Quran must be completed during the month of Ramadan in the Tarawih prayers. And this does not exist at all in the Sharia, and the results in the Imams hastening the Salat and distorting the recitation in order to complete the Quran as fast as possible. So, as I mentioned, my dear Muslims, there's no evidence to say that look, the whole Quran should be recited in the Tarawih. Yeah. So, and this is why, one of the reasons, because obviously there's a lot, subhanAllah, when you recite the Quran properly, it takes subhanAllah, it takes a lot of time. And where people, they feel like they have to squeeze it in Ramadan, in the Tarawih, they feel like, oh, I can't do it unless I go very fast. The thing is, why you put yourself under this kind of target? This is not from the Sharia to be like this, and that's why you end up, subhanAllah, become rushing. Recite from the Quran as with the correctly and calmly, and go through. Even if you start from the beginning, go through as much as you can, without setting yourself this target, I need to complete the whole Quran. And some people, they maybe do it over the 30 days or 29 days. Some people, they try to even squeeze it in over 27 days. Subhanallah. So there's no evidence from the Sharia to support this. And so that is a mistake with those people who claim to say that look, the whole Quran should be recited during the month of Ramadan in the Tarawih prayers. Another mistake the Imams, they do is they avoid the Sunnah. The Imams avoid the Sunnah of the Messenger Muhammad ﷺ by performing more than 8 rak'ah of Tarawih, and by even praying the Witr Salah like the Salatul Maghrib. It has been narrated that the Messenger Muhammad ﷺ used to pray 8 rak'ah of Tarawih, following by 2 rak'ah of Witr, and then by 1 rak'ah of Witr. And the evidence for not praying Salatul Witr like Maghrib is the hadith of the Messenger Muhammad ﷺ, who said, do not pray Witr like Maghrib. And that's narrated in At-Tabarani. And I'll just briefly explain what this means. Basically, obviously, my dear Muslim, Salatul Maghrib, you obviously 3 rak'ah, and you pray 2, and you sit down, and then you get up and you pray 1. Yeah, so that's the 3. But when the Prophet ﷺ advised us, when we pray witr, not to pray like Maghrib. Yeah, so obviously, so that's why you'll see people, they will pray 2 rak'ah, and they will do the taslim. I do the salam on either side, and they will get up and they will pray 1 rak'ah on its own, and again do the taslim and finish. So you prayed the 3 rak'ah, but because you kind of put a separation there, it's made it different, like the Maghrib, different from the Maghrib. Sorry. So you see, so that is one way to pray the Salatul Witr and make it different from the Maghrib, and that's the most correct way. Another way you can pray the Witr, slightly different, is to pray 3 rak'ah in one go, like you together. Yeah. However, that is not the strongest way to pray, but it's permissible. Yeah. Or the other way, some people, I'm sure maybe some people who grew up with the Hanafi fiqh, what they do is they pray pretty similar to Salatul Maghrib, but what they do after the last rak'ah, when they get up from the ruku, they do dua qunut every time. So I to say that's the only different part from Salatul Maghrib. Now obviously that's not the strongest opinion, that's not the strongest way to pray, because obviously there's even, as I mentioned earlier, there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed Salatul Witr and he didn't do dua qunut, to indication that is not compulsory, you see. So but the strongest opinion, or the best way to pray the Witr, is to pray 2 and to give the salam, and to then get up and to pray 1 rak'ah on its own, like this. Also, there is no evidence which indicates that we should pray 20 rak'ah of Tarawih, apart from one da'if, a hadith which has been attributed to Umar bin al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ used to sometimes pray 8 rak'ah in jama'ah, collectively, and sometimes individually, without to prolong, without to rush, create any hardship, or destroy the ahkam of recitation, which is what most Imams are doing today. Obviously, this every Ramadan, subhanAllah, this becomes a controversial, big debating issue. Tarawih, 8 rak'ah or 20 rak'ah, and people debating over this for years, subhanAllah. People, they can't debate on how we're going to liberate Muslim lands. They're not interested in those debates. All these decades, subhanAllah, our land's been occupied. All these decades we have been living without an Imam to give bay'ah to, subhanAllah. People don't want to debate those things. They want to debate, is Tarawih 8 rak'ah or 20 rak'ah. And the final thing mentioned in the notes, that a mistake the Imams they make, that they should remind and advise the people, rather than pausing between every 4 rak'ah of salat in order to collect money for their so-called masjid, they should advise the people from time to time, either before or after the Tarawih, as Ramadan is an opportunity for da'wah and advice. So obviously, my dear Muslims, you know it, subhanAllah, Ramadan is a time, maybe many Muslims, subhanAllah, they don't come to the masjid any other time except Ramadan, the Tarawih. People can call them Ramadan Muslims, but this is an ideal time where many of the Muslims, many of the youth, they come to the masjid. This is an ideal time to give them advice on many other issues. This is advice a great opportunity to give da'wah. But what some people do, for them, it's like, well, this is an opportunity where a lot of the Muslims are coming out to the masjid. This is the golden opportunity to collect money for the masjid. And rather than spending the time, maybe giving a short address to the Muslims, maybe about standing firm, about keeping away from shirk, rejecting Taghut, the obligations of Khilafah and giving bay'ah, obligations of liberating Muslim land, obligations of releasing the Muslims in prison. How many of our brothers and sisters who are in prison and going to be in prison throughout Ramadan? How is their Ramadan going to be while people are stuffing themselves? How many of these Imams they will even speak about the Asir? But you see the buckets that go around, subhanallah, because all the Muslims are here. This is that we can raise a lot of money. So Ramadan, my dear Muslim, this is opportunity. As I mentioned, the Imam, they should take the opportunity. The Muslims will come out, address them, subhanallah, address maybe some of the issues in the community, address some of the issues maybe amongst the youth. Give them some nasiyah, give them some reminders. How many people, subhanallah, in Ramadan, during the day they fast. As soon as after Maghrib, the fast is broken, people get up to all kinds of munkar. Subhanallah, people start smoking, etc., and other stuff. This is opportunity, subhanallah. The Muslims are there, give them advice. Tell them to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't just use the time for just collecting money for the masjid. Nowadays, subhanallah, as you walk into the masjid, there's someone there shaking their bucket. While you're sitting there and you're praying before the khutbah starts, people are going around with buckets. When you come out, as you're coming out the masjid, someone's there shaking the bucket as well. Some other defections, inshallah, I have to go through in regards to defections amongst the people. And number one is mentioned here in the notes: jumping from masjid to masjid. Some Muslims have a very bad habit of jumping from masjid to masjid and traveling from place to place in order to look for the best recitation of the Quran and the best Qur'an, i.e. is plural for qari, i.e. more than one basically. The Muslim should avoid this bad habit, as the Messenger Muhammad ﷺ said, "Pray in the masjid which is closest to you, and do not jump from masjid to masjid." And that's narrated in At-Tabarani. So one of the things some Muslims they do, they will go hunting for which masjid has the best reciter. So one day they'll go to one masjid, and and okay, I heard the recitation that masjid, I'm going to go to another masjid. Maybe someone told him, look, the Imam in this particular masjid, his recitation is very nice, so he'll go there and then he'll listen. So yeah, he's very nice. And they'll try out another masjid. I said, oh, that one's very nice. And then he hears maybe some news, oh, in this particular masjid, some so and so big qari has come from Saudi Arabia, I need to go check that one out. This is what the Prophet he forbade, not to people to do that, jump from masjid to masjid. And how you should be, my dear Muslim, how it should be, you should pray in your local masjid. Yeah, pray in your local masjid. Maybe the Imam's recitation, I say all recitation of the Quran, those people who recite it correctly, etc., with the tajweed rule, is beautiful. But maybe someone else, recitation somewhere else you prefer a bit more. Yeah, but you shouldn't then end up thinking, oh, I want to go to that particular masjid far away and leave your local masjid. Yeah, it shouldn't be like that, and especially in Ramadan, not to go from masjid to masjid chasing the best recitation like this. You should pray in your local masjid. Yeah, unless obviously you got Imam Ferrari there. Point number 2, some of the mistakes some people make. Don't few people. Point number 2, some mistakes some people make is shouting and crying loudly in the prayer. There are some people who raise their voices and they shout and they cry very loudly in the salat, in the prayers. This type of exaggeration is not from the Sunnah and could even lead to ar-riya, showing off, which is a form of shirk asghar, minor shirk. I mean, obviously it's not like the major shirk that will make you kafir, mushrik. So showing off is a form of minor shirk. And it has been reported that the Messenger Muhammad ﷺ used to have aziz in his salat, i.e. he used to withhold his tears as much as possible and not to shout loudly. However, if a person is sincerely taken over by crying, then it is completely different situation. So not to have this, some people, they may have this mentality that look, or someone like they're wailing in the prayer, they're crying out excessively loud, and as a way of as to show, look how much I've been affected by the Quran, as a way of showing, look at my iman, look how much the book of Allah makes me affect. And people, maybe the one person, he's just constantly crying throughout the whole salah. So not to have that issue where you try and do that. Obviously, subhanallah, if someone, he's there and maybe the Quran, is really having an emotional effect on him. He's pondering over what Allah is saying to him, and he can't withhold his tears, he's crying. But not to obviously exaggerate that deliberately. This is what we're talking about. Point number 3, being affected by what people say but not by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Many people are affected more by what other people say or think rather than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. They prefer to stand by the deviant majority in order to be praised and not to upset their community, and are not even concerned at all about angering Allah in the process. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs us in the Quran about how we should have ritual fear and focus in our salat. And He orders us not to have a heart which is solid like a rock. And it's mentioned here in the notes from Surah Al-Hashr, Surah 59 verse 21. And had we sent this Quran down upon a mountain, you would have seen it have khushu', and it would tremble out of the fear of Allah. So obviously, subhanAllah, some people, their hearts have become so hard, that when they hear the Quran, it has no effect on them, subhanAllah. And that is obviously the real heart disease. Forget cholesterol, my dear Muslim. If your heart does not shake when you hear the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you do not hear the remindings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you do not hear about the hellfire, the day of judgment, subhanallah, then your heart is dead. Your heart is dead. And that type of disease of the heart is far worse than your arteries, subhanallah, getting blocked. Point number 4, mistake some people they make is deliberately missing suhoor, or some people call it sehri. Suhoor is basically, obviously, just a reminder, obviously what we call pre-dawn meal. So just before Fajr comes in, it's the sunnah to get up and to have something to eat. Many people deliberately miss suhoor for the sake of not waking up and disturbing their sleep. And this is very common among those who are not practicing, as they are not concerned about praying the Salatul Fajr and benefiting from the blessing of eating the suhoor. Hence they eat as much as they can after iftar, they eat as much as they can after Isha and then go to sleep, waking up in time for work or school but not Fajr. And the Messenger Muhammad ﷺ encouraged the Muslims to wake up for Suhoor in order to distinguish ourselves from the kuffar. And the Prophet ﷺ said, the difference between our fasting and the fasting of the people of the book is Suhoor. And that's narrated in Sahih Muslim. So even the people of the book, they fast, but they don't have Suhoor, you see. And in many hadiths, my dear Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ advised us to be different from the Jews and Christians, to be different from the mushrikeen. So this particular point, obviously, is what some people they do. They don't want to get up, and then they miss out on this great blessing of having this little bit of food, even if it's something small, to get up and have it just before Fajr. It's a great blessing, and we should not abandon this practice just for the sake of getting up a bit early. And what some people even do, subhanallah, they'll have the iftar, and they pray Isha, they pray Tarawih, and then go to sleep, and they won't even pray Fajr at all. Subhanallah. Some people in Ramadan, they don't pray Fajr, they don't pray Dhuhr, they don't pray Asr, they don't pray Maghrib, but they pray Isha and Tarawih. and they think it's okay. Subhanallah. And you deserting the prayer. Obviously this is unacceptable. But this is what I'm saying, some people they're like this. And the Tarawih is something, it's recommended. The Tarawih is something recommended. So someone who prays, subhanAllah, he'll pray Isha and he'll pray Tarawih, that he'll miss the Fajr and the Dhuhr and the Asr and the Maghrib, which is all compulsory. So try not to miss the Suhoor, inshallah. There's great blessing in it. Set your alarms obviously to get up, or especially here now where the nights are very short, you could even stay awake, subhanAllah, and do some ibadah and have Suhoor, inshallah. Point number 5, some people mistake they make is they deliberately delay the breaking of the fast. Another defection amongst the people is pretending to have extra taqwa, extra fear of Allah, and they deliberately delay breaking the fast. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, Allah the Most High says, from amongst my slaves, the quicker the one is in breaking the fast, he is dearer to me. And this is narrated in At-Tirmidhi chapter 13, hadith number 696. So Allah obviously, subhanAllah, is saying that the quicker someone is to breaking the fast, he is more dearer to me. So it's not from the Sunnah, my dear Muslim, to as soon as Maghrib enters, for example, like you hear the adhan, if you're living somewhere where they do the adhan, is to break the fast immediately, not to delay. Not to delay. Oh look, what if it's not really coming? I'll give 5 minutes out of just to be certain, etc. Or I'll just fast a few minutes extra. I know. I've heard the adhan. This is it shouldn't be like that. Rather, as soon as the time is Maghrib has entered, to rush. In fact, to rush to delay the fast. That's why, to the extent you may notice, if you're in the masjid at Maghrib time and the adhan goes off, the muadhin, he will say, for example, Allahu Akbar, and then he'll stop and have a date, or have a few dates, and then we'll continue the adhan. You see, the reason why he does that because of this hadith, because of this concept of not delaying breaking the fast. Point number 6, another mistake that people make they purposely join the salat late. There are some individuals who delay joining the salat intentionally by gossiping and talking right until the Imam makes ruku'. And this will make them miss the initial takbir with the Imam, and hence they will lose most of the reward of the salat. It is also a sign of a person who does not worship Allah out of love and fear, and prays just for the sake of it, in order for people to praise him or to think he is righteous. Now some of these points, some of you, my dear Muslim, maybe you're very familiar with, and I'll just briefly explain this one. Obviously we know if you join the prayer at the ruku', then you have catch that rak'ah. Yeah, you have catch that rak'ah. So obviously if you miss that ruku', then you have missed that rak'ah. So what some people they do, the Imam would start a new rak'ah, and you make the takbir, you recite Surah Al-Fatiha, recite maybe another surah. And what are some people they do? They'll sit and they'll wait until the Imam is coming to the time where he's about to go into ruku', and they'll quickly get up and jump in, and they do takbir, and they'll go straight into the ruku'. You see, this is what this point is doing, so they don't miss that unit of prayer. Obviously, subhanallah, you shouldn't deliberately do that. Yeah, but some people they do that. They end up maybe chatting, etc. And now that with the Tarawih, with the Quran recitation being so long, maybe they feel like, look, I don't want to stand for so long, but I don't want to miss the prayer. So they'll just sit and they'll wait and they wait, and they quickly jump up and join in like that. Obviously, that is a mistake, and that should be avoided. Rather, you should pray with the Imam when he follow the Imam. So when he does the takbir, you do the takbir and you start the prayer. Another mistake, point number 7, that some people they make, looking at the Quran during the salat. Looking at the Quran in salat whilst the Imam is reciting is also a great defection amongst the Muslims, and will lead to other errors and bad habits, such as looking around at other people, playing with his watch or mobile, and constantly fidgeting. Again, this will destroy the idea of having khushu' in the salat, and again could even lead to ar-riya, i.e. showing off. Yeah, so it's not from the sunnah, to have the be holding the Quran. Yeah, the Imam is reciting the Quran, you're supposed to listen to it, not for you to you're reading along, you're holding the Quran in your hand. Obviously the sunnah is to hold your hand on your chest with your right hand over your left and place it on your chest. How are you going to do that when you're holding the Quran in your hand? So it's not from the sunnah to do this, and it should be avoided. Point number 8, leaving the salat after praying only 2, 4 or 6 rak'ah with the Imam. This is another defection, as the goodness and fruitfulness of prayer is to pray with the Imam until he finishes. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, whoever stands with the Imam, let him pray with him until he finishes. And obviously if the person does, Qiyamul Layl will be recorded for him. Yeah. So obviously it's similar to, it has a link to the previous point I just mentioned. Obviously if you start the prayer with the Imam until he finishes, is you get the reward as if you prayed Qiyamul Layl. Yeah. So what some people, you should not miss out the opportunity. Some people, what they do as well, they just pray maybe it's 8 rakat Tarawih, they pray 2, and then they go outside the masjid and they start chatting and gossiping. And everyone's praying inside. Rather stay inside the masjid and pray with the Imam and get the reward. Get the reward of the Tarawih. Don't start just praying, even though the Tarawih is something recommended. Obviously, if you're gonna pray 4 rak'ah, pray 2 rak'ah, pray 6 rak'ah, then you're gonna, end up, just chatting and just, wasting time. Don't leave the prayer. It's better you pray with the Imam, get the rewards. Because Ramadan, my dear Muslim, is as I mentioned, it's the gold rush. Imagine, subhanallah, it's raining gold nuggets. Yeah, you're gonna you get the biggest basket you can find. You want to collect as much of it. This is the month where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showering His mercy, showering His blessing. Where the reward for good deeds are multiplied, grateful. This is the time we want to exert our energy to capture as much of the reward as we can. So we don't want to waste time, subhanallah, on just chatting, catching up with our friends. And a lot of the time people are not necessarily giving good reminders to each other. They're just talking about dunya matters. Or someone who's busy just on social media all the time. Rather Ramadan is a time, my dear Muslims, we need to utilize the time as much as we can in using it to do good deeds. Another mistake, point number 9, that people make is eating too much after iftar. Eating too much during iftar until a point where one cannot stand up to pray or burps too much is also another defection amongst many Muslims. Rather than having a simple iftar, people have resorted to having 3-course meal in order to make up for what they didn't have all day. It is better to break your fast with a few dates and water and then to resume eating after praying Maghrib. As the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when one of you breaks his fast, let him break it with dates. And if he does not have any, let him break his fast with water, for it is pure. And that's narrated in Sunan Ibn Majah, Book of Fasting, Hadith number 1699. So yeah, as that point mentions, subhanAllah, obviously all day you've been fasting. Normally you maybe have breakfast in the morning, 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock. You have lunch, and then maybe dinner, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. And that's why some people, they have this almost like mentality that, look, I've just missed those 3 meals. And now obviously I can eat now. I need to make up for those 3 meals. And they have this huge iftar. Subhanallah. I remember I was reading some notes from Sheikh Faiz. He said, if you're spending more money on food in Ramadan, then there's something wrong. Yeah, there's something wrong. Obviously, the way you should be eating less. How is the case someone who's end up eating more and spending more money on food? But what some people they do, obviously now is the time where they can eat. They just completely fill their stomachs to the brim. And it shouldn't be like this. Rather, obviously, what the notes is saying, to have, break your fast with a few dates and some water, and that's sufficient. Then I find that's the best, and then go pray Salatul Maghrib. And then after Maghrib, inshallah, you can sit down and eat some other stuff. But not to fill yourself, my dear Muslim, to the extent, you're in pain, in the extent that you can't move. You have got all this trapped gas. Obviously, remember the Sunnah of the way to eat. To have 1/3 for food, 1/3 of your stomach for water, and 1/3 for air. That's the Sunnah way to eat. And obviously, you have the night. You have the night time. You can have little bits, throughout the night, rather than, at iftar time, you fill your plate like a mountain, and you put all of that inside you. That's why many people, subhanAllah, they get so tired as well when they come to the Tarawih. Because when you eat, obviously usually the blood gets concentrated around your digestive organ. That's why many times you see people when they eat, they feel very tired after eating, because that time the blood is mainly focused around the digestive system. You see, and that's why. So you don't want to be to the extent where you've had a big iftar and then come Tarawih, you're feeling exhausted and tired and lazy, and in the Tarawih, because of all this trap gas, etc., you're burping. People don't want to know what you had for iftar. Yeah. So obviously, my dear Muslim, take it easy, subhanallah. And have the day, break the fast with the dates, or if you don't have dates, have some water, etc. And then obviously after you pray Salatul Maghrib, after that you can have some other food, but don't be to the extent where you feel like you have to have this huge plate of food. And now inshallah, just coming on to some of the defections among sisters, amongst the women, inshallah. Point number 1 is mentioned in the notes: wearing perfume on the way to and in the masjid. Some women attend the masjid by embellishing themselves, i.e. wearing bright colors and jewelry, and by wearing perfume. This is a great sin and defection amongst the women, as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, any woman who wears perfume and passes by people in order to let them smell her scent is as though she has fornicated. Subhanallah. And that's narrated in Musnad Imam Ahmad. So obviously, my dear Muslims, the general rule, obviously a woman cannot wear perfume that will be it can be smelt by people as she's walking past them. It's not allowed to wear that in public. But what some people do in Ramadan, subhanAllah, when they to go to the masjid as well, they'll dazzle themselves, they put on perfume, etc. And obviously this is incorrect to do that, and it should not be done. The Muslim woman is obliged to cover herself completely, obviously except the face and the hands, and must avoid dazzling herself by decorating a khimar and jilbab. Yeah, so not to have this excessively dazzling khimar. Nowadays, you already see some people wear things khimar. You got all kinds of shiny things hanging off them. Nowadays, subhanallah, you have people wearing the Union Jack as khimar. The British flag, subhanallah. And very ajib times we live in. The Union Jack, which is made up of 3 Christian crosses. That's what the Union Jack is made up of, my dear Muslim. The Christian crosses, and you're going to wear that on your head. Obviously, someone might not be aware of that, because once it's all combined together, it's hard to tell. Obviously, it's not allowed to wear khimar like that. So we must obviously be careful about dazzling ourselves for the women when they're out in public, and especially be careful when going to the masjid. Point number 2, coming by minicab or taxi alone. For many sisters, it is prohibited to go alone to the masjid or any other place, in fact, with a foreign, i.e. non-mahram man in a taxi or minicab, and this sin must be stopped immediately. So what this basically saying is, obviously, my dear Muslims, it's not farther upon the woman to go to the masjid. Yeah. However, obviously it is allowed for her to go, but obviously she should go with her, she should not go with a man who's not mahram to her. Yeah. So she might, for example, get in a taxi or minicab. and because she wants to go to the Tarawih in the Masjid. Yeah, and so obviously this will not be allowed for something that's not obliged upon her. Obviously, if she marries, she can go. Her husband can go with her husband, can go with her father, go with her brother, etc. Go with her son. So this is something that should be avoided. Obviously, in absolute, absolute necessity, a woman can take a minicab or taxi, but this is obviously something that's not a normal situation. And when I mean necessity, I don't mean just, I need to go to the Masjid for Tarawih. I mean something like there's no other available means. Maybe it's emergency, something, she needs to go somewhere like hospital, for example, and there's no other, mahram to take it, for example. Point number 3, leaving children at home while they are doing something that will affect their deen. And it says here, do not leave your children at home while they watch TV, listen to music, or accompany bad friends for the sake of attending Salatul Tarawih at the Masjid. This is something that many Muslim women do in order to do something recommended, and they end up leaving their obligations. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Tahrim, Surah 66 verse 6, O you who believe, save yourself and your families from the fire whose fuel is men and stones. So obviously, my dear Muslims, what some people they do, for the sake of going off Tarawih, maybe the husband and wife, they'll go off and they'll leave their kids, or maybe they're a bit grown up, and they'll leave them at home, and they'll just sit. Sometimes they'll just leave in front of the TV, to watch all the munkar as well, and or they'll just let them go out with their friends, etc. Rather, it should not be like this. You need to obviously be concerned for your kids as well. Bring them to the Tarawih with you. Don't just leave them at home, and to get up to no good. And if you and you should obviously try to encourage them in Ramadan to do good deeds. So encourage them to obviously to read the Quran, etc. Encourage them to do other beneficial stuff. That's why some people, what they do, subhanAllah, during Ramadan, I was speaking to one brother the other day, and he was saying, subhanAllah, he's thinking of in Ramadan just completely unplugging the TV and just packing it away, because he wants to just focus, subhanAllah, or just concentrate his time with the with ibadah. Yeah, obviously the TV is not haram to have a TV, but sometimes people maybe watch it excessively, and sometimes maybe programs. Obviously there's a lot of munkar sometimes on TV, but some people, TV is good, maybe watching the news, keep up to date on what's happening, etc. But there's obviously at the same time they push a lot of munkar on the TV. There's a way of people sometimes to cut down on things that maybe even mubah, maybe things that are just optional. Ramadan is a time, subhanAllah, you want to do things which are from the Sunnah, which are rewardable, which are good acts, and not waste your time with things that are just permissible. You want to do first and foremost, obviously, the things that are fard, the obligation, and then obviously the things that are recommended. And also save your children by not sending them to the schools and the institutions of the kuffar, by preventing them from watching the munkar or on TV, and to listen to music and obeying the laws of the kuffar and having sympathy for the kuffar. Subhanallah, many Muslims, they become corrupt because they went to the kuffar schools, and obviously the kuffar, they run the school. Their curriculum is based on their own values and their own beliefs. Why does it come when your son or your daughter comes out from this kuffar school, and he wants to marry, I don't know, some Hindu girl, or he wants to he says he's an atheist, he's an agnostic. Why does it come no surprise? Or he says, look, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God. Because the kuffar have been bombarding him in science, that look, you question everything. How can you get something from nothing? Question the existence of God. And this stuff is constantly pumped in the kuffar schools. They constantly pump about sex education, teaching you all the munkar, teaching us how it's okay to have all these zina relationships. Subhanallah. And then why does it come to you surprise when the kid then comes out and he says, that he's gay? So that's why, my dear Muslims, we must be very careful, and to keep our distance from the teaching, our children learning the kufr, and that's why many Muslims, they send their kids, to Islamic school, to many people they do homeschooling, parents, they don't want their children to hang around with kuffar, because a man is upon the deen of his companion. You see, you want your children to hang around with people who pray 5 times a day, people who eat halal, people who don't listen to music, who don't smoke, who don't deal in drugs. Those are the children you want your children to hang around with. That's why you need to be very careful on who you let your children hang around with. And that's even within the Muslims, because sadly, not every Muslim is, has that high level of taqwa. Sadly, some Muslims, they listen to music, some they may smoke, they maybe not wear khimar and jilbab even. So we need to be very careful, my dear Muslims. As the verse mentioned, O you who believe, save yourself and your families from the fire whose fuel is men and stones. So do not just be concentrate on yourself. You need to look out for your children as well, and to teach them give them the good Islamic education and the good Islamic upbringing. And obviously you need to be a role model for them, and especially here in Darul Kufr, where there's so much, subhanallah, haram, people calling to the kufr and the shirk, so much munkar. You see, you could very easily, your child can go astray and fall into one of these munkar, one of these haram, one of these kufr. You see, and unless you teach them to stand firm to the teachings of Islam, and you need to be yourself like that. If they, subhanallah, if they see the parent, he's just dissolving into the kufr society, he doesn't care, how do you expect the child to follow, to become good, alhamdulillah, practicing Muslim, when you're not a good role model for them? Point number 4, not controlling their children. Those sisters who take their children to the masjid should control the children as much as possible, and must prevent them from disturbing other musallin, other people in prayer. Many people believe that they can just let their children run wild without to remember that they are accountable for what their children do. So obviously, my dear Muslims, that's why you do need to be very careful when you go with children to the masjid, that you keep them in some kind of control. Not to just let them just run wild in the masjid, because other people there, they're here to pray, and and you could disturb other people's prayer, etc. So you need to bear this in mind. Point number 5, mistake some women they make: busy gossiping and chit-chatting during the time of salat. During the time of salat, sisters should avoid gossiping, backbiting and chit-chatting, as they are all disliked acts, and it will disturb the salat of others. So this is this can also apply to brothers as well. Some people, what they do, there are people, as I mentioned before, some people, they maybe pray 2 rakat and then they leave the Tarawih, maybe go to the back of the masjid, and they're just catching up with their mates and they're just talking away, and the people are in prayer. Which is one of the things, if you're in the prayer and someone else is talking and chatting, it could disrupt your khushu'. So obviously be careful not to fall into that. Point number 6, the mistake some women they make is they delay leaving the masjid. Sisters should stop leaving huge spaces between each other and leave the masjid as quickly as possible before the men finish their salat, rather than strolling out late and wandering around and gossiping amongst each other. They should avoid going to the marketplaces unnecessarily, as it is the most hated places in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So obviously, my dear Muslims, after, for example, if a Muslim woman, Muslimah, she went to the masjid for Tarawih, for example, and the salat finished, she should immediately, obviously, make way home. Not to have this habit where the standing around outside the masjid, because obviously there will be, the men will be coming out, etc. as well, and to avoid this any kind of free mixing, etc. like this. So really they should not hang around outside the entrance of the masjid, etc. They should immediately and try to leave before the men come out if possible. And also the note says slightly different to the point in regards to the marketplaces. The marketplaces, subhanAllah, Shaykh Anjam used to say they should be raided. Because one of the most disliked places on the earth is the markets, the marketplaces. Because you see nowadays, you just need to go here in the UK to any local high street, shopping centre. You see how much munkar there is, and how it should be. Obviously, my dear Muslim, we don't go like window shopping. We don't go for a day out in the market. It should be the case, I need something, I need to go there to get it. Not just like, well, I don't need anything, but I never, I'll just go I have a look around. I might need something, or something might look nice. It should be the case, you need something, that's why you go in there. And as well to try to avoid the munkar as much as possible, you should obviously go in there, what you find, get it, and then immediately come out. Not just okay, I found it, okay, I'm gonna get it, but I'll just walk around up and down the market just in case I find another one cheaper. Nowadays people, they have a whole day out. They spend the whole day, they go and they shop around, then they'll have a lunch there, and then they'll continue after lunch looking at all the shops, all the sales. And obviously, as I mentioned, my dear Muslim, really the best time to go is try to early in the morning, when the people haven't all come out, etc., woken up. So when it's less busy, just go in there, get what you need to, and come out. Point number 7, and the final point on mistakes regards to the women during Ramadan: leaving all their duties while in their menses. The Muslim woman has a permit not to pray and fast whilst on her menses, on a haid, but not to leave all her other duties and good deeds, such as da'wah, such as making dua, and such as studying the deen. So just because on your menses doesn't mean, like, I know I can't pray and fast, doesn't mean you can't do anything. You need to obviously think about, obviously, my dear Muslims, or what you can do, and try to, do other beneficial good deeds, inshallah. And finally, my dear Muslim, just some nasiyah is mentioned here in the notes. We call upon all Muslims to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and stop all this misbehaving, and do not lose all your reward by engaging in what has been mentioned above. Remember the hadith of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who said, "There will be some of my ummah who will bring good deeds equivalent to the mountain of Yemen, and Allah will destroy it all. They are your brothers and are from your skin. They stand up all night the way you stay awake, but when they are alone, they do all what Allah forbids. Yeah, subhanallah. Obviously, my dear Muslim, we need to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala both when we're alone and when in amongst the people. And in another hadith, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there could be someone who fasts all day but gains nothing but hunger, and there could be a person who stands, i.e. in prayer all night. There could be a person who stands but gains nothing but sleepiness. And this is narrated in the Sunnah of Ibn Majah, Book of Fasting, Hadith number 1690. So you see, my dear, some people, they may be fasting in Ramadan and staying up all night praying, yet they could be losing a lot of their reward of their fasting and their Qiyamul Layl and the Tarawih and their Tahajjud, because along with their fasting, etc., maybe they're spreading namima, maybe they're backbiting, maybe they're even, subhanAllah, spreading lies and spreading gossip, these things. Maybe they're getting up to some other kind of bad habits, bad action. So the fasting is not just fasting from food and drink and sexual relationship. The fasting needs to be, also of the eyes, by lowering your gaze. The fasting needs to also be of your tongue, from speaking bad things, from backbiting, from gossiping, from namima, from lying, etc. From a false accusation. The fasting also needs to be of the hands, from touching prohibited things. The fasting needs to also be of the ears, from listening to haram, listen to music, listen to fahisha. The fasting needs to also be of the feet, of going to haram places. So all of these things, subhanAllah, my dear Muslims, we need to be careful. Because someone, along with his fasting and his prayers, if he starts engaging all other kinds of wrongdoing, they can end up demolishing his fast as if he never fasted, because he lost all the reward because of other sins that he used to do at the same time. Therefore, dear brothers and sisters, fulfill your duties and responsibilities, and try your best to this Ramadan, inshallah, to exert utmost effort to push yourself, inshallah, to make the most of Ramadan, to push yourself in the good deeds, inshallah, and also study, learn about what is shirk and what is kufr, in order to keep far away from the anger of Allah, and not to lose all of your good deeds, and for your fasting to be accepted. So and also, if you have an opportunity before Ramadan, learn about things like the fiqh of Ramadan, some of the rules of fasting, what things break your fast, what things don't. Many people, throughout Ramadan, they have a lot of questions. Oh look, can I brush my teeth? I've got an appointment for a blood test, will that break my fast? I vomited, will that break my fast, etc. So obviously, before Ramadan comes, if you have opportunity, and those imams and the Masjid, they should hold a halaqah, where the people can come and learn the fiqh. And inshallah, I was planning to cover this on Tuesday, but I didn't get the notes in time. But inshallah, if Allah wills, on Tuesday next week, inshallah, I'll go through the fiqh of fasting, some of the rules regarding fasting, inshallah, so that we can all fast, inshallah, in the best way that is most pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to witness this blessed month of Ramadan, and make it one full of blessing for us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make his Ramadan full of victories for the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah make it a Ramadan full of victory for the Mujahideen wherever they are. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this Ramadan, inshallah, Ramadan which we leave at the end of Ramadan with all of our sins forgiven, and be like the day, that our mother gave us birth. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this Ramadan where all the Muslim asir are released from the prisons of the Tarawih. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us firm upon Tawheed, firm upon Islam, as long as we are alive, inshallah, and unite us all, inshallah, in the Jannatul Firdaus. Jazakallah khair for listening.